Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me here today. I wanted to talk a little more about this New York Times UFO disclosure event and some of the reactions I've been getting to it. And I wanted to talk about some of the implications for human remote viewing ability, how I call it human resonant viewing ability, or resonant viewing. I've had a lot of comments to the videos I've made so far, and I appreciate all of them. Just continue to comment. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Now, a lot of people still think that there's something fake or false about this because the government's involved and they don't trust the government, and they think this could be what's called a false flag operation and so forth. My feeling about it is that no one is really in control of universal evolution, human change, the larger tectonic forces that push us forward in our own growth. I don't think anyone's ultimately in control of that. And I want to give you an example that shows that things are not in control of any government. Back in 1989, I worked in a research institute just outside of Vienna, Austria. It was a research institute set up by the Soviet Union and the United States under Brezhnev and Nixon in the early 70s. The point was to find some sort of commonalities between the two countries, something they could work on together that had a positive global effect, because it was right at the height of the Cold War. And of course, things like global warming were even of interest back then, population growth, resource scarcity. And so this research institute held these summer programs, and I got invited to participate in one of their summer programs to study, fractals and nonlinear modeling methods, things I was interested back then. Now, the person right to my right of my desk was a guy from East Germany, Uwe, and Uwe and I used to talk a lot, because we were sitting next to each other, and he would tell me about what life was like in East Germany. There was good and there was bad and so forth, and he described to me, what it's like to live in a communist country. Now, this is taking place June, July, August of 1989. Now, just shortly after that, 5 months after that time period, East Germany ceased to exist because the Berlin Wall came down, and East Germany ceased to be a country. It merged with West Germany, and that was the end of communist East Germany. Now, no one at the time saw it coming. It actually came about from what we would call today a fake news event, because an Italian radio station reported one evening that the East German guards at the Berlin Wall were letting people through. And people always wanted to go through to West Germany to visit their relatives. And they often couldn't do this because there was a wall there. I personally visited East Germany in '89, Berlin, and there were many levels of security, guard dogs and guys with machine guns and, towers, and of course the wall itself, lots of barbed wire. Well, this Italian news radio station one night reported that people were being let through to visit the other side. It wasn't true, but it made the news, and hundreds of thousands of East Germans went to the wall to try to get across to West Germany. There were so many people at the border that the guards could no longer hold them back. They asked what to do back to headquarters, and they were told just let them through. And that really was the end of East Germany. So it started with a fake news event, or an incorrect news event, but it still led to the consequence of the wall coming down. Now, no one saw it coming. If you were around back then, was there a single person that predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall and the eventual consequences of the fall of the Soviet Union? No one really saw that was going to happen. So we could say that the fall of the Berlin Wall was a black swan event, because until European explorers went to Australia, no one believed that black swans existed, because in Europe, swans were always white. So a black swan event is a highly improbable event, but nonetheless one that actually happens. And it's the same way with UFO disclosure. It's highly improbable, but when it happens, the consequences are so large that it changes your belief systems, your paradigms, and your outlook on yourself and the universe for good. It's highly improbable. You may not even think it's possible, and yet nonetheless it happens. So The point of this is that things move in ways that even governments are not in control of. And I think this is one of those events. There are a lot of people involved: Bob Bigelow, the New York Times reporters, Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper, and the pilots themselves. These events, once they get going, move in ways that I don't believe anyone is in control of. So even if the events maybe are not exactly what they seem to be, it doesn't often matter in the long run, because of the way history is moving. It just has its own momentum. It's kind of like a glacier. Once it starts moving in a certain direction, you're not going to be able to stop it. This is actually quite a fast-moving glacier at this point. So that's my take on these events. Now, some of you have asked in your questions, Simeon, what's the best evidence we have that this is real? Some of you don't believe the F-18 Nimitz 2004 footage. Fine, I'm not saying you have to believe it. And you don't never have to believe what I'm saying here anyway. It's totally up to you. But you've asked me what the best evidence is. When we were at the citizen hearing in 2013 at the National Press Club, organized by Steve Bassett, the Paradigm Research Group, I think a very well-organized event that had 40 expert witnesses on the topic of UFOs and extraterrestrial interaction on the planet, and retired Congress people, including one senator, former senator, who were presiding over this event. It was a mock hearing in an attempt to get a media feeding frenzy going, which it didn't. At the time, I went up to Steve Bassett, the organizer, and said, great job, Steve, this is a great event. He said, don't thank me yet. When the media trucks show up in large numbers outside the National Press Club, we'll know it was successful. Well, that never happened. C-SPAN, which could have turned their cameras on at any point, remotely, never even broadcast the event. I imagine today they might. And some of the commentary was quite juvenile from the Washington Post, who actually said that belief or interest in UFOs was some sort of mental illness. I mean, just completely ridiculous after these recent events, wouldn't you say? But in any case, Grant Cameron was asked what's the best evidence by one of the congressmen or women, I can't remember at this point who asked the question. And he pointed to the Wilbur B. Smith memo of 1950, which Grant talked about. I encourage you to watch Grant's videos about the subject. He's quite an authority on what presidents know about UFOs. He's doing a very good job updating us on these events as they go along. But the Wilbur B. Smith memo is very significant because it's a declassified government memo. I went into it at great length in this video I did right after the citizen hearing on disclosure. I would encourage you to watch this whole video because it goes into it in a lot of detail. But basically, Wilbur Smith, who worked at the Department of Transportation, was sent there to Washington, D.C. to find out more about what the government knew about UFOs, the U.S. government. And he concluded that the U.S. government, way back in the 1950s, was extremely interested in this topic. He says in this memo, which you can get online, that he had made discrete inquiries through the Canadian Embassy staff in Washington. He was able to ascertain the following. A, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating even higher than the H-bomb. B, flying saucers exist. This is a declassified memo from the Canadian Archives. There's no controversy about that. C, their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. And D, the entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. So we know the United States government was interested a lot before this Pentagon program from 2007 through 2012, and we're told it still continues to this day. They were interested all the way back in the 1950s. So this, to me, is some of the best evidence that this phenomenon is real and that it is a highly classified matter, okay? Furthermore, what is really interesting about this memo are the implications for human telepathy, ESP, and related phenomena, remote viewing, resonance, and so forth. Because Wilbur Smith in this memo goes on to say that I was further informed by the United States authorities who are investigating along quite a number of lines which might possibly be related to saucers such as mental phenomena. So here we're getting evidence way back from the 50s that the authorities back then knew that there was some mental component to interaction with these so-called flying saucers, flying discs, from wherever they may have originated. And the memo goes on to say, and I gather that they are not doing well since they indicated that if Canada is doing anything at all in the geomatics world, they would welcome a discussion suitably with accredited Canadians. So this shows us that the US government was interested in UFOs, flying saucers as they were called back then, the connection to human telepathy, and that they really didn't understand it. They didn't understand it then, and it looks like they still don't understand it now. We're being told that Bob Bigelow has a facility in Las Vegas where some of these materials are stored from these discs, these UFOs, these unexplained aerial phenomena. Luis Elizondo talked about that. He made reference in one of the interviews earlier this week that there are anomalous isotopes. We have heard about this for quite a long time. In other words, these materials are made of metals that don't exist on Earth because the isotopic ratios are not what you would find on Earth. They come from some other part of our galaxy, or perhaps beyond. And that would mean they're extraterrestrial. And apparently what we're being told is there's a 490-page report. Again, this would be quite strong evidence. We haven't seen this report yet. Perhaps it hasn't been declassified since the Department of Defense paid for it with their money to Bob Bigelow. That these materials have effects on human DNA, and possibly, we're told, these might have effects on human telepathy. So this hooks into the Smith 1950 memo. We don't have this evidence as of the recording of this video, but again, I think that would be quite strong evidence that this phenomenon has been around for a long time, and that it's definitely, if it's not off planet, it's from some other part of the Earth that you and I are not familiar with. I mean, we can't discount the fact that this could be coming from a civilization we're not familiar with on Earth, perhaps under the oceans, or even from a parallel reality. You can't discount that possibility either, having to do with the multiverse, parallel realities, and so forth. I mean, we just don't know at this point, but it's nothing conventional. And that's what Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon have said. So again, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I encourage you to look at my previous video on the connection between extraterrestrials and human telepathy. It's something we'll talk about again in a future video. But for now, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon, and take care.